I want to talk to you about Highway to a Dream. And this is a play on a song from the late 1970s that says, I'm on a, not me, they were on the highway to hell. But we're on the highway to a dream. And the impact that building things has on people, has on us. What is the impact? A lot of times we don't think about it. But when we build things as architects and engineers, it has a larger impact on society. And I'm going to frame this around a quote or words that I heard from a lady. I was on a conference call in 2015. And she said, we as the New York State DOT should not just be building the right project, but we should be building the project right. And those are two separate things. Building the right project means, is this what is needed? Is this what's wanted? Is this what's needed? And building the project right means designing it and making it so that the people that it's being built for can actually use it. So two separate things. So that's going to be the framework for the information I'm going to share with you today. So transportation, it's always been a big part of the fight, the movement. In a symbolic way, like this image that you've seen several times, I think Dr. Young, in a symbolic way, a lot of people don't know this, but that bridge is actually named after the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. In Alabama. No, in Alabama. Alabama. His name was John Pettis. A lot of people don't know this, but in a symbolic way, what happened that day, there was a prayer. There was an effort to march from Selma to Montgomery. But you see an image from that day. There's a lot of symbolism to this. The fact that there was a prayer held on that bridge, on a bridge named after the Grand Wizard of the KKK. And not only in a symbolic way like that bridge, but also the movement, we saw sit-ins. Not only sit-ins, but bus boycotts like Dr. King, as you see here with Rosa Parks. She's not in this picture, but the efforts they made through transportation to make a difference in our cities and our communities across the country for equality. So the biggest project that this country has ever taken on was the building of the interstate system. President Eisenhower, who was a military general, wanted to build interstates for defense. And he said, look, we need to be strategic like the Germans and build highways so we could move our tanks and move our trucks on our highway system and not be only focused on our rail movement. There are a lot of hidden faces that fought hard and hard to stop some of this from happening. And you wonder why. Why would people not want a highway system to connect communities, to connect us from state to state? Why not? And here's why not. This image is actually a map of Germany. This is Germany. President Eisenhower was an army officer in the early 1900s in World War I. And when he ended up in Germany, he noticed that the Germans were building this big highway system. And he said, when he became president, I want to do that same thing. In the 1930s, Adolf Hitler went to the extreme end of this. He was building highways everywhere, all over Germany. Those dark black lines you see there, this map was, I think, from the 1940s. Those dark black lines you see there are where the highway system is already built. The dotted lines kind of in between them is where it's under construction. But there's a word at the bottom there, and I'll see at the bottom there, you can barely see it, but it says, and I'm not German, I'm Nigerian, Rice Autobahn. Rice Autobahn. Anybody ever heard the word Autobahn? Autobahn, okay. So here's where it originated from. Rice Autobahn means government highway. So the government was building this highway system, and President Eisenhower said, that's why Germans have been successful. It's getting people jobs, it's commerce, it's defense, it's military. I want to do the same thing in America. I want to do the same thing in the United States. But what a lot of people never talk about, what we never focus on, what's never identified, is the fact that the Autobahn was a rural network without segments into and through German cities. That was never their goal. They wanted to go around cities but still connect them, but not go through them. Germans were smart enough to do that. We didn't do that in America. There have been several articles over the last 2 or 3 years. There's a young lady named Alana Samuels. I've read several of her articles talking about how highways have impacted our communities from a economic standpoint, from a quality of life standpoint, from a health standpoint. What is building highways, this biggest public works project in the history of the country, what has it done to us beyond just getting us from place to place? An example of this is also in Syracuse, one of the images from this article. There's a road going through the middle there, and on top again, there's a highway. It's actually an image down the street from the same image. What you don't see in the bottom right corner there is that's actually a park. So there was a park here where kids played, they had fun, families went out. You see down the street there's an industry. To the bottom right, you can barely see it in the background, there's government subsidized housing. But now you ram a road through it. First of all, you built that crappy housing, the government, and then you ram a road right through it. So what does this do to me wanting to go out and walk or play with my son or hang out? It destroys that. It decimates that. We rarely ever think about these impacts. One of the people that has really focused on this a lot is a guy named Anthony Fox. Everybody familiar with who he is? He's the outgoing or former Secretary of Transportation for President Obama. Those are his grandparents there to the left of the screen, and that's him as a young boy. He grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina with his grandparents. He was roped in by the interstate system. And he said as a kid, he just noticed he couldn't ride his bike, he couldn't walk anywhere, everything was dark and cloudy. It just kind of, it presented this odd mood for the community around him, and he never just understood why. But as an adult, the president appoints him as the Secretary of Transportation. His predecessors have made all this investment in the highway system. And he's saying, yeah, this was good for commerce and everything else, but what has it done to our people? And these are some of the quotes taken directly from him that he said about this. He said, I-95 has cut the heart out of Overton, a thriving black community. In New York City, he said they call the Staten Island Expressway the Mason-Dixon line, if you know what the Mason-Dixon line is. The highway system, the freeway system, this is what it's done. What do you do about it? He started a program called Ladders of Opportunity in the last 15, 16 months before he left office. But those 3 circles there you see, he wants to revitalize, connect, and get people back to work as we look to address this particular issue around how we've built highways. Not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but some communities have actually already taken this on. Dallas, Texas, there's a park called the Clyde Warren Park. The highway's on the before picture's on the left, the after picture is on the right. They capped off a highway and turned it into a park. So, yes, the roadway's still underneath. To allow connection between the communities and allow people to get out, play. Here's what it looks like on the ground. Reconnecting the community. The roadway is still underneath, but embracing the importance of community. In Nashville, same thing happened. This is I-40, TSU, Meharry, Fisk is right here. You build a highway through one of the most important African-American communities in the state of Tennessee. This was the Black Mecca. And you can imagine what happened. Stores closed down, businesses closed down. Huge impact on the community through there. An effort to revitalize it has happened. It's not the same. I don't think it will ever be exactly like it was. But in 2012, we did a ribbon cutting on trying to do artwork under the bridges to try to embrace this mammoth infrastructure that's been placed in between the communities. It's a long road ahead, but efforts are being taken, just like you saw in Dallas, to kind of still utilize this big structure that is there today. There's a direct connection, just like Dr. Jones talked about, between how we drive, how much we've driven in this country, and our health. Because of these highway systems that we've created, we depend on cars, we depend on the highway system to get about. If you see the number of miles we drive is in green. That's what's happened since 1962. Number of miles we drive, adult obesity rate, childhood obesity rate, almost parallel. As we drive more and we depend on our highway system more, here's what's happened to the obesity rate across the country. And we know what has the highest amount of impact is the issues here. Changing the context of where people live. Poverty, education, housing, inequality. That's what makes a difference. We know that. But we tend to spend a lot of time here talking about, oh, you just need to do better, and you need to just pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right? Here's what changing that context, what it means, as an example, in some places in Nashville. Jefferson Street, African-American neighborhood, Miss Winters, Popeyes, Captain D's, KFC. Why do we keep allowing zoning or encouraging businesses? This is the black neighborhood. Why do you need 4 fried chicken joints in one spot? Why? You go to Belmead, where the wealthy live, and you know what this racial class looks like. They have Chipotle. Another point, you can tell, more trees, but they're commercial areas. They got grocery store, several grocery store options. I think there may be one Kroger in this like 3-mile radius, but you got 3 here. We see this everywhere across the country. And you know what that's led to. This is this is from 2010, but Tennessee, second fattest state in an obesity report just a few years ago. This is when I was working for the mayor. This is one of my jobs to address this. How do we try to do that? We sign things like complete streets executive orders to say we need to make sure policy ensures that the entire right-of-way is routinely designed and operated to allow for safe access for all users. If somebody's walking, somebody's biking, they're using a bus, whatever it is, it needs to be safe and accessible. Mayor of Memphis, Tennessee did the same thing. Here's what some of those streets look like when you do this. But one of the challenges is when you start to do more of this, you build sidewalks, you build bike lanes, and everybody now has access. What happens? Gentrification, part of it. It's a part of it. When you create those communities like this, then these places become unaffordable. And everybody else wants to move back in. That's graphic. So how do we achieve this dream that we are looking to measure? What are some of the things that we need to do? 3 important things to me. We need to target strategies that focus on improvements in places of need. So the people that have been left behind historically, who are not as well off, how do we focus on those areas and make sure that we put in place initiatives to address that? We need to move beyond services and focus on changing regulations, policies, institutions, and structures. We spend a lot of time on just saying, well, just give them something. Just give them an EBT card. They'll get on their feet. That's not the way. That's not the way. We have to change regulations, policies, structures, building, the way we've built things to allow for that. And finally, a fair and just inclusion of all residents in a community's economic, social, and political life. Everybody should be somehow at the table. One of my favorite quotes from Dr. King, and I'll end with this, is our life begins to end when we stop focusing on the things that matter. This matters. The way we build our communities matters. We are the unusual suspect in the discussion. We are the unusual suspect. I don't have a background in law, education, health. That's not a background. My background's in engineering and planning. But oftentimes we get left out of the conversation. But Dr. Jones mentioned increasingly the public health professionals are saying, no. We know we can't get this done by ourselves. Everybody needs to be at the table. So this matters. Let's make sure that we continue the good fight. Thank you all.
Thank you. Toks, I had a question for you. So you talked about how, the whole motivation to create the highway system in the United States really was different in terms of looking at disrupting communities and social structures, or it wasn't sensitive to that fact. Have you seen a change or an evolution of that in terms of how we go about planning transportation networks now?
I think so. There's been a change over the years. In 1969, 1970, something passed, a bill passed called the National Environmental Protection Act, also known as NEPA, that essentially put in place policies and laws like we're fighting for. That you have to go through a process before you build anything, a highway, whatever. If you're spending federal dollars to build anything in this country, you have to go through what's known as the NEPA process before you can move forward. And part of that looks at things like what the impact of whatever you're building, what impact is it going to have on the communities you're building around. So there have been some policies and laws, but it is a hard fight because a lot of state DOTs, like I work for, we've got billions of dollars, and you've got a goal in mind. You want to build something, and somebody, one of these faces, as was, I thought was excellently described before, is saying, no, you can't build that because it's going to have this impact on my community or have this impact on my society at large. It's just a hard fight because we've got the money, you've got the power, and a lot of times when you're trying to get something like that done, the government is focused on getting it done. But there have been several examples over the years, even in Memphis, Tennessee, where we stopped a part of I-40 from going through a park. In Miami, similar efforts. So there have been some small victories over the years, and I think the attitude has changed from the government, from us folks, or we folks that build infrastructure like that. But it's not, the president right now is talking about a $1 trillion infrastructure bill or plan. So how do people stay alert and ready for what's going to happen with that money? People have to constantly be in tune with those efforts.